everyone. Okay, so to start, one thing I do want to make a mention of is that supposedly Oda took very heavy influence from Albert Einstein in designing Vegapunk, and that not only makes so much sense when looking at the design of the character, but when looking at his influence across the series, just everything he is, everything he represents, and just everything he believes in when it comes to science, especially in this chapter, where we do dive much more into his methodology and his ideology and just how he perceives, that science should be perceived. The comparison to Albert Einstein is definitely more than apt when talking about Vegapunk. Like, Einstein was always seen as an eccentric genius, and as well on top of that, the greatest scientific mind of his era, and even today he's still seen as one of the greatest scientific minds of that era. And after reading this week's chapter, you get even more of that sense, more of that Albert Einstein kind of influence, and that sense that despite Vegapunk's best intentions, his intentions are still very misguided and misplaced. Like, Vegapunk, this almost feels like a rectification almost of Albert Einstein in some ways, because in that same of Vegapunk of Albert Einstein's inventions, because Vegapunk is a character. He genuinely and purely believes in the idea of science, and that science, in that sense, no matter who wields it, is a force for good of all humanity. Similar like how Einstein believed as well that without a strong core foundation, humanity will not survive. But as Jinbei also argues, for as noble as Vegapunk's intentions are, ideology is and will always be a factor in every decision ever made, and hearing that he has literally stored his brain on the island, it really paints a picture of how and why events are starting to come together in the way that they are. Like pretty much Vegapunk has created and assuming that the whole brain thing is meant to last, even under heavy gunfire, even under heavy like cannon fire, or whatever method is used to destroy it, I assume it will last no matter what attempts are used. So, yeah, he has taken precautions. The question, and this is his way of saying, I genuinely believe that one day humanity will find a genuine use for this knowledge. And unfortunately, like Vegapunk, there are so many few people in the One Piece world who are actually willing to use that knowledge for the good of humanity. But okay, all that aside though, yeah, let's talk about the whole Kuma situation, because obviously we see that Vegapunk does lament what he did to Kuma, what happened to Kuma, and that there are things he does need to tell Bonnie, which, yeah, you better hope she wakes up soon so you can get on that explanation, because unless I'm mistaken, it does look like Kuma is barreling on course towards you guys. Which, yeah, with the reveal we get about the giant in this chapter, it does make me wonder if in some ways the pacifistas and Kuma are basically in some ways another failed attempt on Vegapunk's part to recreate the giant using the human body as an energy source, as the energy from a body produces, because it would make sense, because the energy from a body produces way more like electricity, way more power than sometimes even the human battery, like sometimes even more than the human battery, at least for the replacement for the power source he couldn't replicate. Like, it would make sense when you consider the question of where he got the parts to construct the pacifistas. Like, it had to have come from the giant, which is why Kuma is probably acting as erratic as he is at the end of this chapter, and probably barreling through the Revolutionary Army. Like, I think in some ways the parts from the giant are probably activated. Of course, the other interesting part of this is learning that although the giant existed 900 years ago, it was also active 200 years ago during the era of the Fishman discrimination. So someone had acquired the power source to activate it. And honestly, I feel this is just another thing that's pushing us towards Elbaf, because while being a giant robot being a giant robot and bearing similarities to how the giants look doesn't necessarily doesn't immediately like say that Elbaf is involved. At the same time, it does kind of raise certain questions about the giants' history now, like specifically, like, weirdly enough, I don't know how much of this is true, because with Big Mom, I think at the time, she probably just wanted to reestablish the whole, like, relationship that Mother Caramel had with the giants. But this does kind of put a little bit of suspect on the whole arranged marriage between Loki on Prince Loki and Lola now, because and honestly, even more so, why the giants even agreed to that arrangement at all. Like, what was it that the giants would even get from this that didn't involve Big Mom's own ego or pride? I guess the obvious answer is that the giants were afraid of Big Mom, maybe. But even putting aside like all of that, even Big Mom's emotional attachment to them, it does. Last week's episode and this week's, it is kind of putting a lot of stake on Elbaf for me. Like, whatever happened, like, it does feel like Elbaf might be at least a very important key towards discovering what exactly this power source is. Even if the power source isn't related to Elbaf, I think it still is in some way like pretty much part of that. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I think all this is definitely setting the stage for whatever happens on Elbaf is going to be huge. Now, let's backtrack a bit here and talk about Lucci, Kaku, and Stussy approaching the island, because it's probably safe to say the government, to some extent, knows what Vegapunk is hiding, but how much they know is the key, because he asks for Luffy to take him and presumably his clones off the island, which is the right call to make, but the only question is, what's going to happen if Lucci and Kaku discover the Punk records? I mean, the way Vegapunk described how it works, they're not likely to know what it is or even its purpose, but that's the kind of the problem as well. CP0's mission is to eliminate everything on the island, so I have to imagine if he's so confident about leaving the island, then it's protected in some way, even by whatever method CP0 uses to destroy the place, of course. But even then, like, it feels like one of those situations where even if they fail to destroy it, it's going to at least very much end up in the hands of the world government. So, like, is he gonna take that with him too, or is he gonna leave it here? Like, it's a genuine question I have. Because the way he talked about the whole satellite thing on his head, it sounds like he might be leaving it behind, but can he afford to do that is, I guess, the big question I have. Now, obviously, of course, the bigger question is why he even, the reason as to why he won't is just because, unfortunately, it's one of those things as well where all these questions I have probably aren't going to get answered for a while because, like, again, Oda is on break, so yeah, that's a thing that's happened. So yeah, Oda's going to be on break for like a week. So unfortunately, we're gonna be out for 14 days without One Piece content. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it is going to be just interesting to see, like, what kind of secrets, what exactly is Vegapunk hiding? Like, it feels like there's a lot more going on. It feels like he knows something, and why he's so sure everything is gonna be okay if he leaves. Like, yeah. But Like, and that's a big thing too. Like, what exactly does Vegapunk know? Like, what does he know that we don't? What is it about this whole situation that makes him say, "Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with whatever happens to, like, whatever happens to my brain and all that." Like, how can he be so confident? That's the question I really want to know about, because Vegapunk seems like he's taking this with a little bit too much of a carefree attitude, but I don't think he is either. Like, what does he know that we don't? We or even the government don't. So, yeah, but yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share it around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.